He who pays the piper calls the tune. Let's look at the dollars the Gates Foundation has leveraged to get participants in Common Core to dance to the Gates tune. The Gates Foundation has greased the palms of both conservative and liberal groups. The Thomas Fordham Institute, known for supporting conservative causes, received $1.4 million from the Gates. The second largest teachers union, the American Federation of Teachers, racked in $1 million from Gates. The National Parent-Teacher Association received over $2 million. Guess what? These three groups all had nice things to say about Common Core. What a surprise. Gates, the great benefactor, gave the ultra-left-leaning Center for American Progress almost $3 million. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction received a measly $823,637. The National Writing Project was awarded over $2.5 million. For what? We're not sure. Achieve Incorporated, who got over $25 million. The Council of Chief State School Offices, who got over $71 million. And the National Governors Association, who received a pauper sum of $30 million for their role in, quote, wanting to have Common Core standards. Who out there is surprised that these Gates money recipients have become cheerleaders for Common Core? Just what are the crowning achievements of Common Core? Think cash register. All previous textbooks have been obsoleted. Education is now social engineering and a big cash cow. But for taxpayers and students, it opens a Pandora's box. Common Core is untested and not voted on by the community. It's expensive and destructive. Like Obamacare, there's way too much regulation and the potential for too much government power that's easily abused. Say goodbye to local control of education. Control moves to federal bureaucrats and foundations. Some critics of Common Core have serious reservations regarding its constitutionality. They reference the 10th Amendment, stating that powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to it by the states are reserved for the states respectively or to the people. It's not just the Constitution that's been considered with regard to the legality or illegality of Common Core state standards. Common Core critics point out the very law establishing the U.S. Department of Education in 1976. Quote, no provision of any applicable program shall be construed to authorize any department, agency, officer, or employee of the United States to exercise any direction, supervision, or control over the curriculum, program of instruction, administration, or over the selection of library resources, textbooks, or other printed or published instructional materials. Perhaps some organization or person will launch some court challenge on whether the federal government's role in bribing states to accept Common Core was illegal. The NEA, the largest teachers union, recently boasted about how well Common Core was being accepted by the teachers. Their glowing PR release was not supported by the actual results of their own survey. One of the survey questions was, overall, how would you rate the quality of the Common Core state standards relative to your state standards prior to CCSS? 44% said about the same quality, 7% said my state standards are of higher quality, and 49% said Common Core standards are of higher quality. In other words, for 51% of the respondents, Common Core standards did not offer an improvement from the individual state's previous standards. And for this, taxpayers are being asked to pony up approximately $15 billion to implement Common Core. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, recently made news by stating that you think the Obamacare implementation is bad, the implementation of Common Core is far worse. There's legitimate concern that Common Core will place straitjackets on teachers. Student and teacher creativity may be sacrificed with so much focus on high-stakes testing. The two testing consortiums, PARCC and Smarter Balance, would appear to be controlled by the U.S. Department of Education's review process, and teacher performance reviews that closely track with student test scores and invite teaching to the test almost exclusively. Momentum is growing among the anti-Common Core forces. A few states are reconsidering some of the program elements. An example is Governor Rick Scott of Florida, who has joined with some other states in backing out of the PARCC testing. Scott wrote Secretary Duncan, the assessment has become a vehicle for the federal government to, quote, involve itself in state-level decisions. Bravo to Rick Scott. While both the NEA and the AFT unions have endorsed Common Core, they have reservations about the testing. Remember that those unions receive serious money from the Gates Foundation. Both unions are calling for a moratorium on outcomes associated with Common Core. When the official publication of the American School Superintendents lambasts Common Core, you know there's a problem. This attack on Common Core happened in the winter 2010 issue of the Journal of Scholarship and Practice. They addressed a real concern that each student is different and that standardized teaching is inappropriate. They related teaching to medicine, making the point that physicians individualize treatment and that we should not allow our children to receive programmed, standardized, one-size-fits-all instruction. And they did not see any evidence that standardization would improve education. They were concerned that the organizations writing Common Core had a profit motive and may not have placed children's education as a priority. Lastly, they pointed out the absence of taxpayer input in the process and referred to Common Core as a, quote, social experiment. Most education decisions in Oregon are made at the state level. Such was the case with the adoption of Common Core standards. The Oregon Board of Education voted on each of the standards. The vote for the English language was 6-0. The vote for math was split, 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Board members voiced concern, but said they didn't want Oregon to be among the few states that didn't move towards national standards. Such bravery, wouldn't you say? Oregon chose smarter balanced assessments for their testing group. You've got to wonder about the folks at the Oregon Department of Education. They admit not knowing how much Common Core adoption would cost the taxpayers. Smarter balanced tests are expected to double the price of assessment, jumping to $9.2 million from the current $4.6 million billed to taxpayers. The OED admits the adoption of the full test is dependent on legislative funding, so there may be hope that funding may not be forthcoming. On a national level, Common Core is another burden on taxpayers, especially if education doesn't improve. One estimate is almost $16 billion for the first 7 years. This breaks out to $1.2 billion for new assessments, $5.3 billion in professional development, $2.5 billion in instructional materials, $6.9 billion for technology, infrastructure, and support. Costs, of course, will vary by state and even school district. But the question is Common Core a tool for educational improvement or a weapon for those who want to indoctrinate children? The very idea that we're abandoning an approach that treats each child as unique and putting every child into the same mold would seem to be a recipe for failure and should be of concern to parents, teachers, and administrators. Are you sufficiently motivated to take positive action against Common Core? On the subject of Common Core adoption and execution, here's the, quote, guidance local school boards were recently given by the Oregon School Boards Association. Oregon's local school boards are not responsible for adopting the Common Core standards. Responsibility of local boards is to implement state academic standards, including Common Core. The Oregon Board of Education has the total authority and responsibility unless the legislature or governor overrules it. If a local school district refuses to comply with OBE guidelines, state funding can be withheld. This amounts to 60% of total school funding. The local school districts could also lose federal dollars, approximately 10% of their funding. This should dispel the notion that local districts exercise any power to reject or amend Common Core. As a parent or concerned citizen, there are positive steps you can take. First, express your informed concerns to teachers and administrators, local school boards, representatives at the state and federal level, and other parents. Also, support only those candidates who you know will fight Common Core. Carefully review your child's instructional material for propaganda or anything you disagree with. Continue teaching right from wrong at home. That's where it belongs in the first place. And finally, never give up the good fight. The stakes are too important.